Well, howdy doody. Let me remove that little clip from studio. Let's get an audio check going. See how we're doing. I didn't give people much preparation for this video. I normally post them a day in advance. But truth be told, I didn't know I was going to get through all of that. Kolbrin Bible is huge. I've already done one video on the Kolbrin Bible a long time ago. It's presentation is everything though, and the last time I did it, I had tubes sticking out of my noses. I had an oxygen tank. I could barely breathe. You know, it was a dark time in 2020. It's been 5 years, so it's time to do this video. It's time to revisit this and add some more details and some clarity and some more commentary. Besides, except for a few of you, except for some of my moderators and a few of you veterans, most of you don't know what the Kolbrin Bible contains, and that it is a source of very verifiable, very good verifiable information. It is a very unique source. It seems like all the books, texts, and traditions that the establishment is pushing on us, we get discouraged because the more we look, the less we find. We find out that it's all BS. Like the Jewish calendar only goes back 450 years. We find out all these different things that were passed off as truth. We find out that the Old Testament is barely older than the New Testament, and the New Testament isn't near as old as Christian fundamentalists want to portray. It's not. It took over 500 years for them to take a literary masterpiece and turn it into pass it off as history. Still, even in the 1200s, they were still killing people, the Waldenses and the Cathars, the Roman Catholic Church, because these people knew that the story of Jesus was literary and that it was the greatest spiritual document known to man, and it had nothing to do with a physical crucifixion. They knew that they were immortals, and they knew that their immortal souls did not need a physical human sacrifice in order to purify them, because purification only comes from within. So the Roman Catholic Church exterminated them. Look it up yourselves, guys. It's a terrible time in the 1200s. It's the extermination of the Cathars and the Waldenses. I cheated too. I normally grind my own coffee beans, but man, I was such in a hurry trying to get all this presentation together. I cheated, and I got my backup coffee over here, and I got my hot pot, and man, I boiled some water real fast, and I threw that spoon of Nescafe in there. Just like that. And voila, we have burning hot coffee. Genocide is ancient. Yes, it is. So, you have some major takeaways. You have some major takeaways from this video. One major takeaway that we will address toward the end of the video, because I'm going in chronological order. I'm going in the sequential order of the books that are laid out, the different scrolls that are in the Kolbrin Bible. So the last thing that we're going to be looking at is a Exodus account that is far more believable and more accurate than the Jewish version we have in the Old Testament. And it is profound. When I conducted my original deep dive into the Kolbrin Bible 5 years ago, the video dates to 2020. Not very many people have watched it. I wouldn't watch it. Hell, I got tubes in my nose, man. I'm not communicating right. I was still sick. I just had something important that I wanted to get out, and I should have waited till I was better. But truth be told, it's become necessary in Archaix 4.0 to revisit this topic, just like we will revisit other topics like the Oera Lindh Dutch manuscript. We'll soon be talking about the Voynich manuscript. There's a common denominator between these ancient manuscripts. We're gonna discuss that here. But I kind of upped my game a little bit. I got a new font package. I paid for a new font package, as you can see, from where's it at? Let me show you guys. I'm gonna share my screen. I know some of you noticed. I do all my own thumbnails. I'm kind of neurotic about that. I know you saw my new font package. You've never seen me use that font before. Oh, I got about 60 new fonts. So I'll be playing with those. And that coffee's so real. The Kingdom of Illusion, Archaix 4.0. The Lost Secret of Reality, and eyewitness accounts of the Phoenix in the Kolbrin Bible. Some of you have read the Kolbrin Bible. There's no doubt. So this video is not only about the lost secrets of Phoenix found in this most amazing text, but let me give you some history on this book and other books that are also suppressed by the establishment. So in order to understand the Kolbrin Bible, we need to understand basic Mediterranean European history coming out of the Dark Ages into the Middle Ages. Because out of the fog of the Dark Ages emerged strangers who walked the roads of an illiterate Europe. Many of these men, they traveled from the Middle East to the Mediterranean, from the Mediterranean into the castles and into the villages of Europe. In their satchels were treasures hidden away of lost scrolls, of manuscripts on parchment, and fantastically built books of leather, paper, and copper, some with bronze bands, even books that had padlocks and key locks built into the binding. The wars of Rome, they left valuable writings secreted away from the very old libraries of the ancient world, like the Library of Pergamum, of Rome, of Alexandria, Egypt, and also in North Africa, the Great Library of Carthage. Many who began acquiring these hidden libraries were ship navigators who accepted books as payment for passage. Now, these men wandered into Dark Age Europe, and gemstones, gold coins, wagons, livestock, all these were given in exchange just for the opportunity to copy a traveler's scrolls or his old book. Can you imagine such an environment? When the learned were starving for reading materials, and the only ones that really had them were travelers, and in many instances, these were Jews. The term wandering Jew, it's not hyperbole. It's actually a fact of history, especially for this period of time. So these travelers, they would get free lodging during their stay in a township or a castle or a city, and as their ward diligently copied the manuscript, they lived like kings. They were fed, their animals were fed, they were able to put up everything, they could relax. If it took days, if it took weeks for a noble or for a scribe to copy their book, they were well fed and taken care of during that period of time. And when they left with their book. A rare book was a traveler's greatest asset, gaining him entry almost into anywhere. Men would invite these travelers into wine and dine with their family just to hear what the possessor of the book told them that the book contained. Only a few people were even literate. These books were sheathed in bronze, copper, and iron, and decorative covers bound with locks and chains. They protected them from prying eyes, and some of these books were even trapped. Little poison needle traps and razor blade traps. The ingenuity of the period is pretty impressive. Here in a few minutes, I'm going to show you the text of the Kolbrin Bible. We're going to read it together. It's going to blow your mind what's in this book. So it's in this way, well into the Middle Ages, the learned acquired great books from the old world that found their way into the libraries of Roger Bacon, of Geoffrey Chaucer, Hevelius, Isaac Newton, Dante Alighieri, Christian de Troyes, and the truly amazing occult histories of Francis Barrett. Shockingly detailed works appeared in Europe, like the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, and the writings of Johann Trithemius, who taught Nostradamus, and Henry Cornelius Agrippa, and even Paracelsus, who was also a student of Trithemius. Thousands of texts entered the libraries of Europe in this way. It was a very unique time when knowledge was very highly valued. So now I introduce you to a collection of writings almost 700 pages in length, treasured for well over 2,000 years and copied multiple times over the centuries. These very old Jewish and Celtic literary treasures were kept together as the Kolbrin Bible. This collection was introduced to me 5 years ago by Margaret Elsbeth. Initially, I didn't take it very seriously. It was difficult for me to accept that in all my reading of ancient authors, I had never come across not only this book or even any reference to this book. But man, am I glad that I look now. Because when I looked, I was blown away reading that the Kolbrin Bible were texts from ancient Egypt, Phoenicia, the early Celts, with the most detailed descriptions of Phoenix cataclysms that I had ever seen from any other ancient sources. Not even Harold T. Wilkins in the 1950s provides us the graphic imagery that we read in the Kolbrin Bible. So the Frisians, having two pretty good Phoenix passages in the Oera Lindh Dutch manuscript, is a good approximation, but it doesn't compare. Doesn't compare to the Kolbrin Bible's eyewitness accounts. So the record of the Phoenix visitations that I put together in a perfect world timeline, they're from ancient Akkad. They're Ugaritic, they're Phoenician, they're Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greek. A lot of them are just out of different annals, regnalists, in traditions, myths, just mentioned in passing. Just fragments. But in the Kolbrin Bible text, we have elaborate and very detailed eyewitness testimony, what Phoenix did and what people saw. And that's what we're going to show in this book, in this video. It is absolutely amazing what is in this text. So I have finished my data mining of the Kolbrin pages, and I isolated all Phoenix passages, which are spread across many long pages that I extracted. So this video is packed with amazing data and even a prophecy passage about the last days that pertains to us that is harrowingly, there's my word, harrowing. It is harrowingly accurate today. It's awesome that the publishers and early translators of the various texts that became the Kolbrin Bible are aware of a chain of custody from Jewish owners to Celtic and Phoenician possessors of ancient copies ultimately coming and deriving from Egypt. Whether this is entirely accurate is forgivable due to its change of ownership at least multiple times over 2 millennia. The chain of custody for the New Testament is far worse. It's terrible because we know from the historical record that over 4,000 Christian documents were eliminated from consideration and to be introduced into the canon. We ended up with a measly 30-something documents for the New Testament. Or 22 documents for the New Testament. So, the earliest composition of the Kolbrin Bible claims to have been an Egyptian hieroglyphic, and it was simply known as the Great Book. It didn't become known as the Kolbrin Bible much later, but it was called the Great Book, carried out of Egypt by the Israelites, dating itself approximately the 15th century BC. We don't know if that's true. We don't know if it's true or not. This is what it claims. The majority of the historical narratives it covers, though, is the pre-flood world to the Exodus event, which makes this a pretty remarkable find, because the end of this book details the absolute collapse of the Egyptian infrastructure and the escape of all these slaves out of Egypt. That's the end of the book. All the rest of the Kolbrin Bible's 685 pages cover the pre-flood world and the events after the flood to the Exodus event. That's what makes this account so incredible. It covers a time periods that we have almost no data for, except in cuneiform and on ancient stelae and on Sumerian prisms. We don't have much. But we have a lot right here in the Kolbrin Bible. Over the millennia, only one copy of this archaic text, this archaic text even survived. It survived the tumult of the ancient world, just like only one copy of the Dutch Oera Lindh manuscript also survived, and only one copy of the epic Anglo-Saxon poem Beowulf survived. Just as only one copy of the Voynich manuscript survived. Just as only one copy of the Book of Slavonic Enoch, titled Secrets of Enoch, survived. Accidentally found in the archives of the Belgrade Public Library. Only one copy of the lost manuscript of Nostradamus has survived, discovered recently, and today we have one surviving copy of the Book of Jasher, though historically there were at one time 4 different discoveries of the book. Some of these books, like Jasher and the Prophecy of Mother Shipton, the lost manuscript of Nostradamus, and the Oera Lindh Dutch manuscript, they're just like the Kolbrin Bible in that scholarship seeks to cast doubt as to their origin, because they did not arrive at the present through the proper channels controlled by the establishment. And the common denominator linking all of these suppressed books is the undeniable fact that they all possess remarkable knowledge on the Phoenix destructions. Process that for a minute. The controlled establishment academia demonizes this whole list of books that I just mentioned. And yet, the common denominator between them all is that only one copy was ever found of each one, because they're all being destroyed. And the other common denominator is they all have very detailed, specific information on Phoenix destructions. You can't make this stuff up, guys. The Kolbrin Bible texts arrived by Phoenician ship to the British Isles about 2,000 years ago. Any other copies have been lost or destroyed. And for those of you who don't know, 2,000 years ago, there were whole academic colleges brimming all over Britain. Yeah, the Romans invaded Britain for a reason. We're in the historical record, in the establishment, in the establishment material, we're given the idea that the British people were primitive barbarians and the Romans were invading them. But what you're not told is that the reason the Romans couldn't conquer is because there was nothing barbaric about them at all. They were very advanced. They were very educated. The Druid colleges only took the intellectual elite. People from all over Europe 2,000 years ago traveled to the Isle of Man, to the Druid colleges. All over Britain, there were centers of learning and libraries. Britain was thriving 2,000 years ago. And the Romans wanted it, but they couldn't get it. That's why they had to build Hadrian's Wall. It was they could only conquer so much. They did a huge disservice, though, in dismantling the colleges. The Romans did that. But it was at this time that Britain was just rife with literature. In all of Europe, the Britannic Isles were where all the books and scrolls and all the learning, the centers of learning, were at this time. It was 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago is where our story, the Kolbrin Bible, comes. This is the provenance of the manuscript. It claims to be 15 centuries older, ending at the Exodus event, the narrative. Now, the content of the Kolbrin Bible does indeed end at the Exodus, but we just don't have a chain of custody from 1500 BC, the end of the story, to where it appears 2,000 years ago. So Celtic priests took the manuscript away and spent years transcribing the fragile text onto bronze sheets to put together what was known as the Bronze Book. This is still before it was the Kolbrin Bible. It used to be called the Great Book. It was known by a lot of people. Then, when the fragile manuscript was transcribed onto bronze sheets, which would have been a whole library full of bronze sheets, it was now known as the Bronze Book. So there could be several references to it in historical writings for which we haven't identified yet. So this first metal edition became known as the Kolbrin Bible. So it is obvious to anybody who has studied the Kolbrin Bible that we're dealing with an abbreviated text, just like Genesis. Anybody who has studied Genesis and identified the colophons will know that Genesis is an abbreviated text, meaning that its parent source would have been much larger, but it is a condensed version of a pre-existing text. The Kolbrin Bible is 685 pages. In English, in other languages, it could be up to 700 pages. But the fact remains is that the subject matter of the Kolbrin Bible is very revealing, and it seems to be paraphrasing from a larger body of literature. This wasn't a very uncommon practice. The original was probably closer to 1,000 pages or more, but this was a common practice in antiquity when copying manuscripts to shorten the length of any material that could be removed that would not endanger the integrity of the message, the integrity of the text. This is why the book of Genesis has fragments that came straight out of the Babylonian Enuma Elish text, which is much longer. Genesis is just an abbreviated corpus of material. And lastly, the Bronze Book, or the Kolbrin Bible, was merged with an ancient Celtic wisdom text into a single work called the Kol Book about 1,000 years ago, from which we obtained its current name, the Kolbrin Bible. So it was the Great Book, then it was the Bronze Book, then it was the Kol Book, and then it was the Kolbrin Bible. It's gone through 4 iterations in the last 2,000 years. Now, the veracity of its provenance may have issues for, we may have issues for books passed through many hands throughout history, and they're sure to accrue mistakes. However, the value of any text is measured by its content. Does it offer evidence of its claims intextually? And does it cross-reference to historically known places and events? And does it possess very specific data that other texts also relate? The Kolbrin Bible meets all 3 standards, as we'll see in this presentation. So the edition popular today is by the publisher Your Own World Books, which added a citations system and made necessary grammatical corrections in the version I'm using today. The detailed specific data on the Phoenix destruction during the Old World in the Kolbrin Bible is fantastically descriptive beyond anything found outside of its pages. Phoenix was referred to in hundreds of ancient texts, in passing or fragmented quotes and short notations and regnal records, but in the Kolbrin Bible, there are whole pages narrating eyewitness accounts. The following material is in the exact chronological order as provided in the text, and as the entire collection is almost 700 pages, what is shared with you here is only 1% of this material, because the majority of the Kolbrin Bible concerns itself with religious, spiritual, and doctrinal matters, having nothing at all to do with cataclysms. That's what makes these references so much more believable. But this 1% of material is still a lot of amazing knowledge throughout the narrative. And my own interjections are made to you in blue so you can see that the white text that you're about to see is the Kolbrin Bible, and the blue text is my commentary. I don't want you to confuse the two. Many people in passing 2,000 years ago, they went to great toil and hardship in preserving this knowledge for future posterity. So let's hear what these texts have hidden. And for those of you who don't know, you can get the Kolbrin Bible. I mean, you can get the Kolbrin Bible. You can order it. Here's the Oera Lindh. You can get this on Amazon. Here's the Dutch Oera Lindh. It's got 2 Phoenix appearances in here. Here's the Book of Jasher. You can get it online easily. This is my favorite translation, Albinus Alcun. Book of Jasher also has 2 or 3 Phoenix. Well, it's got 3895, 2239, and 1687. It's got 3 Phoenix episodes in here. Here's Beowulf, translation of Beowulf. If I was you, I would get Burton Raffles' translation. This was probably a sensational translation, judging from the cover. But if you want a real good, with commentary, translation of the Anglo-Saxon, adventures of the Geat, Beowulf, when he goes to the kingdom of Hrothgar and defeats the Grendels, I would get Burton Raffles' translation. This is Nostradamus. This is Nostradamus right here. This is Mother Shipton's prophecies. You can get all these online, guys. This is Mother Shipton from 1648, which would have been 1648, 130 something years after she died. She died in 1488. Here's the Voynich manuscript. More on the Voynich manuscript here. This is the Dutch Oera Lindh manuscript. Mother Shipton again, 1642. Oh, actually, it was printed in 1642. It was written in 1625. Another Mother Shipton. Here's Nostradamus, the lost manuscript by Ottavio Caesar Ramati. Many will die before the phoenix dies. In 670, his dwelling shall endure. Yeah, you guys know. I've cited that a few times. So, my introduction is a little lengthy, but my introduction is now over. We're going to get into the body of the text now. We have a hell of a ride. So let me exit this. Check my chat real quick, and we're going straight in this text. Yeah, don't forget to hit that like button. Don't be stingy. This shit's free. Jason, what is the correct spelling of apothem? Are you talking about geometry and apothem? Apothem is a sloping distance. If you have a structure that's 500 feet high, vertical distance would be 500 feet, but an apothem is from the base of the structure to the top. It's a sloping distance. It's going to be way more than 500 feet. It's apothem, apothem. All right, let's see. Flat Earth Zoomer, Burton Raffles' translation of Beowulf is one that I had for years. I don't have it in my library anymore. You guys know what? Once I got out of prison, I started rebuilding my library. But while I was in prison, I can only have so many books. So all the books that were coming to me on a weekly and monthly basis, once I data mined them, the only thing that made it home, as you know, were 26 bags of all my research notes from the thousands of books that I read while I was in the joint. So that's the only thing that made it home, was all my research notes. My dad picked them up at visitation. Sometimes my sister, sometimes my brother, sometimes a friend. But they all 26 bags made it to my property. So the actual books, I would use the books as trade for other good books other prisoners had. Sometimes I give them away. Sometimes I lose them. Things happen in prison. Anytime I had 20 or 30 books loaned out, I'd only loan books that I've already read. My locker stayed full of books. But once I read them, I just loan them out. If they didn't come back to me, it wasn't no big deal. Wasn't no big deal. I've already data mined them. All right, let's begin this amazing trip. Because remember, the value of a text is always based on its content. We can't go by the establishment. We can't go by academia. We can't go by the academies and scholarship. They've done nothing but create an impeccable track record of lying to us. So we have to search all these things out ourselves. One tux. Let's do it. All right, I'm sharing my screen again. All right. Let's see here. What are we looking at? There we go. I think y'all can see that pretty good. Yeah. I know y'all can see that. The Kolbrin Bible. Remember, it's my habit. For those of you new to my channel, you don't know, it is my habit. When I'm giving dissertations out of very old books, I show them on the screen because it's pertinent that people see that I'm not misquoting a text. It is pertinent that people see that this information actually exists. This isn't just somebody freestyling on YouTube. And with the Kolbrin Bible, it's extremely important that you realize that this information has been passed down for a very long period of time. And it just may be the original material, or came from the original corpus of material from which later another people wrote the Old Testament and then added significant details for which the historical record cannot verify. Remember, the whole history of Egypt was outlined by the Egyptian Greek historian Manetho in the 3rd century BC, who had access to the greatest library the world has ever known in the Alexandrian Library. It was the greatest at the time, with about 2.5 million texts, and yet he doesn't mention anything about the Exodus. Doesn't mention anything about Moses. Doesn't mention any of these things. So remember, what you're going to see about the Exodus account in here is amazing, because it totally removes all the additives that you find in the Old Testament that just don't make sense. Man, you know what? It's been raining all day. It's kind of chilly in here. The Kolbrin Bible is separated into several books, and the first is called the Book of Creation. In the Book of Creation, we read, "There are no true beginnings on earth, for here all is effect." What? The ultimate cause being elsewhere. The beginning of the Kolbrin Bible literally sets the stage, telling you everything going on in this experience is just an effect of something that is causing all this to happen that exists somewhere else. For a 2,000-year-old narrative, that's a pretty good description of you're in a construct, and the phenomena inside that construct is being controlled by those outside the construct. Just me. That's just me. But in the very beginning of the Kolbrin Bible, in the Book of Creation, we read there are no true beginnings. So it's talking about cyclical history. No true beginnings on earth, for here all is effect. The ultimate cause being elsewhere. This then is how these things were told in the great book of the sons of fire. So the Kolbrin Bible is referencing an older text that antedates the composition of the Kolbrin Bible itself. God laid his hand upon man, saying, now you are even as I, except you sleep. What? Remember, in the beginning, God made man in his image. But it says right here, God laid his hand upon man, saying, now you are even as I, except you sleep. Then the text goes on and reads, talking about the human race. They're enclosed in matter in the kingdom of illusion, while I dwell here in the freedom of reality and truth. Where have you read anything this clear about our condition from a 2,000-year-old text? They're enclosed in matter in the kingdom of illusion, except you sleep in the kingdom of illusion, while I dwell here in the freedom of reality. What have I been telling you since the inception of my channel? We exist inside the photo negative of a real reality, somewhere that is real somewhere else, but it's not real here. This is the beginning of the Kolbrin Bible text. It is not for me to come down to you, but for you to reach me. I just did a video on the Exodus and what it means. In that video, and in about 40 videos before that, I've explained in depth that we're living life sims, and you will only make your exodus when it's your time, when you're ready, when you've learned what you're supposed to learn here. It is not for me. This is God speaking. It is not for me to come down to you, but for you to reach me. Man, to me, that's profound. That's almost like the video I did last week. I told you, man, this information should not be oppressive to you. You should take this information about the Exodus, that we have a promise of an exact year when the Exodus will occur. That should be very liberating to you. I mean, that's crazy. To see this in the Kolbrin Bible is crazy. So I'm here in the blue text. You're going to see blue text quite a bit. This is my commentary. This is not the Kolbrin Bible. Again, I'm reminded of Maya, the world of illusion, in the ancient Vedic text, and I again see reference to the holosphere. Real quick. In the book of creation, we read there are no true beginnings on earth, for here all is effect. If there's no true beginnings, it's a cycle. It's cyclical, over and over and over. This is a looping program. The loop never stops, but the participants change. The ultimate cause being elsewhere. Then this is how these things were told in the great book of the sons of fire. God laid his hand upon man, saying, now you are even as I, except you sleep. So God's awake, but he's not in the construct. He's outside the construct. You sleep. You're enclosed in matter in the kingdom of illusion, while I dwell here in the freedom of reality. Remember the mathematical exercise that I've been showing you for a long time. How how the only number in existence that does not collapse to zero is 2178. Everything else by multiple permutations will eventually collapse to 2178. I've given this demonstration over and over and over. When numbers are analyzed against their holographic reflections, every number in existence collapses. 2178 loops. It forms like a looping portal that's attached to another arithmetic for which we cannot penetrate. Those of you who want to see really good charts on that, they're on Twitter. So we move on. In chapter 3 of the Book of Creation, called Destruction and, it's supposed to say Recreation. Let me change that, because this is going to be a part of Archaix Academy. In the Book of Creation, called Destruction and Recreation, we read in verse 1 that it is known, and the story comes down from ancient times, that there was not one creation, but two. A creation and a recreation. It is a fact known to the wise that the earth was utterly destroyed, once then reborn on a second wheel of creation. Now, concerning this wheel, Earth moved onto our present ecliptic plane in the solar system, and that is the wheel referred to here. Remember, we came from the wheel of Nemesis, the Nemesis ecliptic. Earth departed the Nemesis ecliptic, and this alteration of movement changed everything for mankind. Genesis also describes two creations, and this is known by all biblical scholars. Notice that nowhere in the Kolbrin Bible are any books of the known Bible even mentioned. That should tell you something. This is evidence of being older. It is also evidence of being an independent writing. Now, in the Book of Creation, we read, at the time of the great destruction of the earth, God caused a dragon from out of the heaven to come and encompass her about. The dragon was frightful to behold. It lashed its tail, and it breathed hot fire and coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath on the belly was a ruddy, huge glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke. It spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stinging, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passage caused great thunderings and lightnings to rim the thick darkened day. All heaven and earth being made hot, and the seas were loosened from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. There was an awful shrilling, trumpeting from the sky, which outpoured even the howling of the unleashed winds. I know some of my Archaix veterans are hearing all the hallmarks of the Phoenix phenomenon here. Now, my own note here is Phoenix identified in the oldest records as the sky dragon, and the trumpeting sound accompanying every visit. Remember the Book of Revelation, when the great wormwood appears in the sky, what happens? A trumpet sound. It's called the seven trumpets. There's even angels blowing trumpets during the apocalypse. In the Book of Creation, we read men stricken with terror went mad at the awful sight in the heavens. They were loosed from their senses and dashed about crazed, not knowing what they did. The breath was sucked out from their bodies, and they were burnt with a strange ash. Inside the bowels of the earth were great writhing upheavals, and a howling whirlwind rent mountains apart. The wrath of the sky monster was loosed in the heavens. It lashed about in flaming fury, roaring like 1,000 thunders. It poured down fiery destruction amid a welter of thick black blood. So awesome was the fearfully aspected thing that the memory of it mercifully departed from man. His thoughts were smothered under a cloud of forgetfulness. Guys, this is describing shock and the post-traumatic stress of the entire race. This is what shock does. It gets you to shut out any memory of the traumatic event. Let me get to my coffee. In the book of creation, the earth vomited forth great gusts of foul breath from awful mouths opening up in the midst of the land, and the evil breath bit at the throat. Before it drove men mad and killed them, those who did not die in this manner were smothered under a cloud of red dust and ashes as they were swallowed by the yawning mouths of earth or crushed beneath crashing rocks. There's your red dust phenomenon. Now, the cloud of red dust is a signature of Phoenix in the old accounts, as many of you know who have been following my books and videos. In the book of creation, the first sky monster was joined by another, which swallowed the tail of the one going before it, but the two could not be seen at once. The sky monsters reigned and raged above the earth doing battle to possess it. But the many-bladed sword of God cut them in pieces, and their falling bodies enlarged the land and sea. So we have to note that a couple things. One, that Mother Shipton and Nostradamus both describe back-to-back world destructions in the last days, and Shipton called the culprits sky dragons. These two sky dragons would be Phoenix and the Nemesis object. And I need to add something here, right here in front of you, because I just noticed that it said, the many-bladed sword of God cut them in pieces and their falling bodies. We only have one reference to the sword of God in the Bible actually doing something like this. And this is in Hebrew, it's called the ever-turning, but it is the fiery blade in Eden that the cherub wielded that prevented mankind from going back to Eden. The reason Adam and Eve were prevented from going back into Eden was because Eden was lost. The sky dragons had destroyed it. The cherub that guarded protected surviving humanity, but also prevented them from going back into Eden. Eden was gone. It was lost. Couldn't live. So the blade is a reference to the Genesis reset destruction. The blade is a reference to the Genesis reset destruction, mentioning the cherub that guardeth. Same thing as the Sphinx. The Sphinx is the same thing that guardeth ancient Eden, which is Giza, Great Pyramid. I just want to put that in there because, as you're going to see, there's a reference. This is going straight into the Adam and Eve destructive reset. It's not just my interpretation, guys. I have shown on my channel and in my published books that even 19 centuries ago, there is commentary from, I believe it's Philo Judaicus, that talks about the cherub that guardeth with the sword. This was an astronomical designation for something appearing in the sky, and that Adam and Eve were not actually a part of a creation event. They were a part of a destruction, and they were the survivors. In the book of the creation, in this manner, the first earth was destroyed by calamity descending from out of the skies. So here it is. In the book of creation, the first world, the first earth is destroyed. The vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth monsters more fearsome than any that had ever haunted the dreams of men. Well, it looks like the end is going to be just like the beginning, because in the book of Revelation, we got monsters coming up out of the abyss, 200 million of them, to attack everybody that's on the surface. The vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth monsters more fearsome than any that had ever haunted the dreams of men. In the book of creation, Men in their dwelling places were gone, and only sky boulders and red earth and red mud remained where once they were. Isn't that interesting? Red earth and red mud is the result of the sky dragon. Where have we heard that before? But amidst all the desolation, a few survive, for man is not easily destroyed. They crept out of the caves and came down from the mountain sides. Then we find in the book of creation that the great canopy of dust and cloud, which encompassed the earth and enshrouded it in heavy darkness, was pierced by a ruddy light, and the canopy swept down in great cloud bursts and raging storm waters. Man, y'all gotta get off my phone. Hold on, guys. I gotta put these notifications. Go in my settings and put this do not disturb on. Alrighty. All good. And the canopy swept down in great cloud bursts and raging storm waters. Cool moon tears were shed for the distress of earth and the woes of men. How interesting that the moon is associated to water falling from the sky in the pre-flood world. In a cataclysm. In the book of creation, when the light of the sun pierced the earth's shroud, bathing land in its revitalizing glory, the earth again knew day and night, for there were now times of light and times of darkness. The smothering canopy rolled away, and the vault of heaven became visible to men. In the book of creation, the rainstorms ceased to beat upon the faces of the land, and the waters stilled their turmoil. Earthquakes no longer tore the earth open, nor was it burned and buried by hot rocks, and the land masses were reestablished in stability and solidity, standing firm in the midst of the surrounding waters. The oceans fell back to their assigned places, and the land stood upon its foundations. Life was renewed, but it was different, and man survived, but he was not the same. Man stood in the midst of renewal and regeneration, and he looked up into the heavens above in fear for the awful powers of destruction lurking there. Henceforth, the placid skies would hold a terrifying secret. When men came forth from their hiding places and places of refuge, the world their fathers had known was gone forever. The face of the land was changed, and the earth was littered with rocks and stones, which had fallen when the structure of heaven collapsed. One generation groped in the desolation and gloom, and as the thick darkness was dispelled, its children believed they were witnessing a new creation. Time passed and memory dimmed, and the record of events was no longer clear. Generation followed generation, and as the ages unfolded, new tongues and new tales replaced the old. I remind you that this text was written over 2,000 years ago, so these are some profound statements. All right. In the book of creation, it is written that there were some who struggled harder, and there were some who were disciplined because their forefathers had crossed the great dark void. Their desires were turned to Godward, and they were called the children of God. And in the book of creation, their country was undulating and forested, and it was fertile, having many rivers and marshes. There were great mountains to the east and to the west, and to the north was a vast stony plain. Note, This describes perfectly ancient North America between the Rockies and the Sierra Nevadas to the west and the Appalachians to the east. The reason this is important is because I've showed you in Archaix that the oldest sources that we have on this cycle of cataclysms, as I've given it you guys the source materials in many presentations, that scholarship in the 1800s was convinced that whoever founded Egypt, whoever founded India, the Harappan civilization, Mohenjo-daro, whoever founded the civilization of the Tigris-Euphrates basin, they came from North America. Meaning, most of the events that are recorded in all these different sources that concern the pre-flood world did not happen where we find the cities of Sumer, Akkad, all the Near Eastern culture, Babylonian. They were the ones that preserved these stories after they received survivors by ship that landed there. But the actual stories and histories belong to another people in another geographical region. And the Kolbrin Bible just perfectly described North America. Let's see. In the book of creation, then came the day when all things became still and apprehensive, for God caused a sign to appear in the heavens so that men should know the earth would be afflicted, and the sign was a strange star. Man, how many times have I showed you guys that a strange star appears in the sky right before the Phoenix phenomenon year? Yeah, man. Sky, I tell you all the time, the sky is not what you think. Our world is not what you think. In the book of creation, the star grew and waxed to a great brightness and was awesome to behold. It is put forth, as it put forth horns and sang, being unlike any ever seen, so that men seeing it said unto themselves, surely this is God appearing in the heavens above us. But the star was not God. The star was directed by his design, but the people had not the wisdom to understand it. Note, Phoenix is said in the Nag Hammadi text to be from God, a weapon against the rulers of this world. I didn't make that up. The Phoenix is designed to keep the archons in check. The archons are the elite, the rulers of the world. Phoenix always appears as a red star in the heavens before it gets huge and fills up the sky looking like a red dragon. In the book of creation, such was the likeness and manifestation of God. In those days, and awesome was his countenance, and terrible his voice of wrath, that the sun and moon hid themselves in fear. Again, very common with Phoenix phenomenon. The moon turns red as blood and the sun vanishes. And there was a heavy darkness over the face of the earth. Remember the Genesis text in the very beginning. This is exactly what it's describing. Genesis says, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Many biblical scholars believe that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are describing a cataclysm before Adam and Eve. The reason they say this is because there are many references in the Old Testament that says the creation was perfect. In the beginning, everything was perfect. But that's not how we find the world. Because in the very beginning of the book of Genesis, which is the very first book of the Bible, we already have in the very first chapter, in the second verse, the world is completely destroyed, dark and covered in water. Then there's a renovation process, not a creation. Now in the book of creation, we read that great fires and smoke rose up from the ground, and men gasped for air as the land was rent asunder and swept clean by a mighty deluge of waters. A hole opened up in the middle of the land, and the waters entered and sank beneath the seas. In the book of creation, the mountains of the east and west were split apart and stood up in the midst of the waters, which raged about, and the north land tilted and turned over on its side. Now, what is being described here is the Genesis 1 Adam and Eve reset pole shift cataclysm. The lithospheric displacement is the only time the crust of the earth has actually moved and slipped over the mantle, and the ancients recorded it as the appearance of a new heavens and a new earth because everything familiar to them had changed. Now, it doesn't even matter if our world is fixed and hasn't really moved. The very fact that the stellosphere has shifted 30 degrees would make any observer in the ancient world on the ground automatically assume, if they believe the world was a globe, it would make them automatically assume that there has been a 30-degree pole shift, when actually all the movement is just in the sky. And the whole vault of the sky has been shoved down 30 degrees and then remained there. It would, by all intents and purposes, it's a perfect pole shift. And the ground hasn't moved a bit. Remember, the sky is a lie. It is a holographic projection, and it's hiding something else. The sky, what you're seeing up in the sky, is not actually there. That's the subject matter for many other videos, though. The Genesis destruction was caused by the Phoenix and began the pre-flood world history. All my Archaix veterans know that. 3895 BC began the countdown of 1,656 years to the Great Flood of Noah. There's never been any argument as to the length of the pre-flood world. It's in every old book. It is 1656 years, which is 138 times 12. Now, in the book of creation, again, the tumult and clamor ceased, and all was silent in the quiet stillness. Madness broke out among men. Frenzy and shouting filled the air, and they fell upon one another in senseless, wanton bloodshed. Remember the fear of Cain. I'm not saying the story of Cain and Abel is real. What I'm saying is that it conveys a very real fear. After Cain murdered Abel, which is being described right here, people going crazy, fighting each other. Whole infrastructure has collapsed. Adam and Eve's story, the reason they're found naked is because the infrastructure collapsed. They've lost everything. They're not naked because they're primitive. So Cain kills Abel, and then he's punished and he's banished. But he fears the banishment because he literally says, "What if the others kill me?" So but in the Genesis text, isn't he supposed to be the only other person? I mean, if you killed your brothers, nobody else. It's just mom. It's just mom, dad, and you. But it's not. But Genesis is an oversimplification. There were other people in the world. And the whole story of Cain and Abel exemplifies exactly what the Kolbrin Bible is saying here. Right after that massive cataclysm that began the pre-flood world, humanity went nuts and went crazy. Cain killed Abel. Neither did they spare women or child, for they knew not what they did, as they ran unseeing, dashing themselves to destruction as they fled to caves and were buried. And some taking refuge in trees where they were hung. There was rape, murder, and violence of every kind. Some of the people were saved upon the mountainsides, upon the flotsam, but they were scattered far apart over the face of the earth. They fought for survival in the lands of uncouth people, and amid coldness they survived in caves and sheltered places. This is all post-cataclysm, the beginning of Genesis pre-flood world. This detailed picture of past events caused by the Phoenix now makes a lot of sense as to why the governments and billionaires were building bunkers and underground facilities, as we are 15 years away from the return of the Phoenix, as this return is the one that was foretold in the Book of Revelation and by Mother Shipton and Nostradamus. Also in the Ragnarok. I should have mentioned that too. I'm going to right now. And the return of the Fenris wolf in the Ragnarok. Fenris wolf eats the sun and the moon. Now, in the book of creation, the land of the little people, in the land in the land of the giants, and the land of the necklace ones, and the land of marshes and myths, and the lands of the east and west were all inundated. So the Adam and Eve destruction caused flooding everywhere, just like the flood of Noah. They're 1656 years apart, just like Rashi said 900 years ago. Every 1656 years, the world goes through a cataclysmic episode. So this is interesting because this basically alludes to the fact that there were different lands that were known at the time. Lands of the little people is very interesting because archaeologically we know that there were humans about 2.5 to 3 foot tall. They had towns and cities and buildings and structures and weapons and eating utensils, and we have found them. And then over thousands of years, they became less and less populated, and they were living on the outskirts of human villages. Yeah, these little people have been found in South America and in China, whole villages of very, very tiny humans. There is nothing mysterious about this. It's absolutely archaeologically verified. Now, land of the giants, like the Patagonian giants, and the land of the necklace ones. Now, I don't know if that's a reference to Anak, because the Anakim were the people of the necklace. The necklace is a reference to the Sumerian goddess Aruru, or something like that. She was the goddess of the necklace. I don't know if that's supposed to be necklace ones or not having a neck. I'm not sure. But anyway, the land of marshes and myths and the lands of the east and the west were all flooded. Basically, it's just telling us that the whole world was flooded. Not that the whole world flooded, but there was flooding all over the world. The mountain land and the lands of the south, where there is gold and great beasts, were not covered by the waters. This is very interesting. They were less than children in those days and could not know that God had afflicted the earth. The southern hemisphere wasn't flooded. Listen, it sounds to me that almost the entire world flooding was experienced in the northern hemisphere, everywhere, but the continent of Africa and South America were unaffected, which is interesting because Lenormand and several historians in the 19th century were convinced that the flood traditions were known all around the world and that the only race that had absolutely no traditions of a great flood were the African. Also, remember the book that I gave a book monkey presentation on called 1871 Cyclical Flood Theory? The scientists that wrote that book showed that Ice Age is BS, and that there is a cyclical flood that happens, and it's because the equatorial bulge. It says the equatorial bulge builds over time. It's not natural, but when in volcanic outgassing, it implodes because all these volcanoes blow up and the equatorial bulge goes down. The equatorial bulge is a ring. When that ring goes down, the pressure of the southern hemisphere oceans, which is a lot more than the oceans in the northern hemisphere, floods the northern hemisphere, and then the water trickles back down and it stabilizes, and the whole world stabilizes for a few thousand years. And during that few thousand years, the subsurface pressure builds, and as it builds, the equatorial bulge gets bigger and bigger and bigger until again it pops. And when it pops and all the equatorial bulge sinks, all the pressure of the southern hemisphere oceans flood the northern hemisphere again. This dude shows. This answers for all the glacial errata. It answers for the distribution of gigantic boulders. He says Ice Age can't answer all the geological phenomena, but cyclical flood theory does. This is from 1871. The Kolbrin Bible is describing cyclical flood theory. It's pretty profound, guys. It's pretty profound. It's linked to the Phoenix. Why? Because volcanism. Phoenix is also called Vulcan. It is very interesting in the book of creation. We read, the earth is not for the pleasure of man, but it is a place of instruction for his soul. Can we get a drum roll, please? Can we get an archaic shout out? Been saying that for five years. Man, I've taken all kinds of criticism. I've taken all kinds of slack from all these people out there pushing Soul Trap. and all their followers pushing soul trap, and all these NDE experts out there, and all these people that got these doctorates and OBEs going around telling everybody all we're in a soul trap and all. Yeah, there it is right there. Here's a 2,000-year-old reference to something I've been telling you. We are not in a soul trap at all. We're not in any danger at all. The whole reason people think that they are in any type of peril is because they are looking for answers in the external world of the illusion. When the truth is everything's just fine in the inner world of the spirit. Yeah, all answers are only found from within. Anytime you search the holosphere for answers, remember, it's all tenuous. Everything around you in the world of phenomena is nothing but an extension. It's illusory, and it's an extension of the very deceit that confines you. Remember, your body is deceptive. Your body is an avatar that belongs to a construct that is absolutely illusory. It is all deceitful, but it feels real to you because you are jacked into it by virtue of the central nervous system. This amazing soul psyche interface makes us believe all this is real when it's not. Yeah, no loving oversoul would actually ever put you in danger. No. But true growth can come from the illusion because you believe you're in danger. It is very interesting. In the book of creation, we read the earth is not for the pleasure of man, but it is a place of instruction for his soul. Man, I'm going to drink to that. I'm only drinking coffee to that right now, but I think after this video, I might hit some bourbon. A man more readily feels the stirrings of the spirit in the face of disaster than in the lap of luxury. The tuition of the soul is a long and arduous course of instruction and training. Sounds like reincarnation theology to me. Rebirth and simulation till the soul is ready to exit. I've got no problem with the Kolbrin Bible at all. Now we get to the next book in the Kolbrin Bible. It is called the Book of Gleanings. And in the Book of Gleanings, we read the remnants of the sons of Nazarah remain upon the mountains which are against Archaix by the land about the encampment of Lamech. What? Are you guys paying attention to this? In Archaix, there were wise men filled with inner wisdom who read the book of heaven with understanding and knew the signs they saw and the deeds of men in all the lands about the mountains and how it brought them to that hour. Then the day came when the lady of the night changed her garment from one of a different hue, and her form swept more swiftly across the skies. Her tresses streamed out behind in gold and copper, and she rode in a chariot of fire. The people in those days were a great multitude, and in a loud cry ascended into heaven. This is a period after the Adam and Eve reset. Humanity has become populous again. This is during the pre-flood world. Now, for a little context. After the pole shift, the new vapor canopy alters the appearance of the moon, called the Lady of the Night. Human population explosion among lunar worshippers and a smaller group of wise men, and Archaix, and it needs to be capitalized, and Archaix, which is referenced in the Book of Enoch as the origin of the Watchers who brought civilization to the pre-flood people. In the Book of Enoch and in the Enochian writings, the Watchers came down from Mount Ardis. That's what this is, Archaix. Lamech or Lamech sounds to me very close to the Sumerian pre-flood city of Larak, or the Hebrew pre-flood name Lamech, the father of Noah. Now in the Book of Gleanings, we read, then the wise men to Shurappak, now called Serapesh, and said to Sasuda, the king, behold, the years are shortened as the hour of trial draws nigh. So the watchers who came out of Mount Ardus after a cataclysm are now telling the people in the surface world city of Shurappak, which is mentioned in the Sumerian king list as one of the 5 cities of the Sumerian Pentapolis ruled by the 7 kings of the Anunnaki. Here it is right here in the Kolbrin Bible that these wise men come out of the mountain. When they came out of the mountain, they came and told the people on the surface, you got a problem coming. Something's about to happen. This is during the pre-flood world. The shadow of doom approaches. This is the message of the watchers to the king of Shurappak. The shadow of doom approaches this land because of its wickedness. Yet because you have not mingled with the wicked, you are set apart and shall not perish. This so your seeds may be preserved. Then the king sent for Hanok, son of Hagathar, and he came out of Archaix. I still need to. For there he had heard a voice among the reeds saying, abandon your abode in possessions, for the hour of doom is at hand. Neither gold nor treasure will I give, but a reprieve. Now again for some context. Described here is the pre-flood city of Shurappak, mentioned so many times in ancient Sumerian and Babylonian records. And Hanok is a reference to Canok or Hanak, the biblical Enoch, before the flood, who came down from Ardus, called Mount Ardus in the Enochian writings. Enoch is Enoch as Enki, who sailed from the homeland to arrive in Sumer with the remnants of the surviving Anuna, bringing knowledge of civilization. Enoch led the Watchers, but in Sumerian, Enki led the Anuna. Both arrived by ship with the ingredients of civilization right after a cataclysm. I am referring to the 34-39 BC Gihon flood that killed 1/3 of the human race. You guys know we've got a few videos on that. It's also highly mentioned with source materials in my published books. That's what's being referred to here, because that's the only cataclysm that Enoch knew that happened during his period. Now, in the Book of the Gleanings, we read, the king had entered, and with those of his own blood and his own household went into the ship. In the Sumerian epics, the flood hero Utnapishtim, who survived the deluge, was the last king of the city of Shurappak. Of all the people who entered with him, 2 understood the ways of the sun and moon, and in the ways of the year and the seasons. 1 of the quartering of stones. It's talking about those who were saved on the ark, on the great ship that was used to survive the Gihon flood. Not the flood of Noah, the Gihon flood. So 1, the quartering of stones. One of them taken onto the ship, the making of bricks, and 1, the making of axes and weapons, and 1, the playing of musical instruments, 1, bread and the making of pottery, 1, the care of gardens, and 1, the carving of wood and stone, 1, the making of roofs, 1, the making working of timbers, 1, the making of cheese and butter, 1, the growing of trees and plants, 1, the making of plows, 1, the weaving of cloth and making dyes, 1, the brewing of beer. Of course, we got to have somebody who knows how to make beer. 1, the felling and cutting of trees, 1, the making of chariots, 1, dancing, and 1, the mysteries of the scribes. 1, the building of houses and the working of leather. There was 1 skilled in the working of cedar and willow wood. One was a hunter, one who knew the cunning of games and circus. One was a watchman. There was an inspector of water and wells, a magistrate, and a captain of men. There were 3 servants of God. There was Hanok and his brother and their household, and Devon and 6 men who were strangers. Now, what we have here is Enoch brought technology to Sumer, and the list of trades mentioned here is echoed in the Book of Enoch concerning the knowledges that the Watchers gave to humanity in exchange for the daughters of men. The whole story of the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men is of a technologically advanced race of people that were much taller and bearded over a people of short stature that couldn't grow any facial hair, that had jet black eyes and jet black hair. That's the whole story of Genesis, sons of God and the daughters of men. It's cargo cult scenario. Now is detected a lacuna in the text. A lacuna is a space that is either missing or a period of time that is missing. So the narrator jumps straight to the next appearance of Phoenix. There's nothing in between what happened with the Gihon flood in the days of Enoch and then the next appearance of Phoenix with the great flood of Noah. The next appearance of Phoenix is the great flood. The narrator went from Adam and Eve reset, which was a flooding, to the Gihon flood, now to the great flood of Noah. This is what the Kolbrin Bible's doing. It is giving us the business. All these events that I've showed you in Archaix, it's giving us the business back to back of basically what the sky dragon is responsible for. The Gihon flood in Enoch's time to the deluge of Noah is 12 centuries later. This is a very famous period of time. I'm not going to bore you. I know many of you already know. It is the 432,000 Shars of the Sumerian king list, when Enki appeared with the Anuna before the flood. Because in the Sumerian narrative, Enki appears with the Anuna to the Sumerians 432,000 Shars before the Great Flood, which is only 12 centuries. It's 432,000 divided by 360 days of the Sumerian sexagesimal year, and you get perfectly 1200. Okay, in the Book of Gleanings at the dawn, in the Book of Gleanings at the dawn, men saw an awesome sight. There, riding on a black rolling cloud, came the destroyer, newly released from the confines of the sky vaults, and she raged about the heavens, for it was her day of judgment. Remember, the destroyer, even in the Babylonian Tiamat, was described as female. The beast with her opened its mouth and belched forth fire and hot stones in a vile smoke. It covered the whole sky, and the meeting place of earth and heaven could no longer be seen in the evening. The places of the stars were changed. They rolled across the sky to new stations. Then the floodwaters came. The Book of Enoch also describes a minor pole shift and not total lithospheric displacement when it described that Noah looked up and saw that the sky had become inclined. The Book of Gleanings reads that the floodgates of heaven were opened and the foundations of earth broke apart, and the surrounding waters poured over the land and broke upon the mountains. The storehouses of the winds burst their bolts asunder, so storms and whirlwinds were loose to hurl themselves upon the earth. In the seething waters and howling gales of buildings were destroyed trees and uprooted mountains cast down. There was a time of great heat, and then came bitter cold. The waves over the waters did not rise and fall, but sank and swirled. There was an awful sound above. Note that that sound is a phenomenon of Phoenix that's described as a deafening roar in the sky. The Book of the Gleanings adds that the pillars of the heaven were broken and fell down to earth. The sky vault was rent and broken, and the whole of creation was in chaos. The stars in the heavens were loosened from their places, so they dashed about in confusion. There was a revolt on high as a new ruler appeared there and swept across the sky as the majesty, the destroyer, passed away into the fastness of heaven. And the great flood remained 7 days, diminishing day by day as the waters drained away to their places. Then the waters spread out calmly, and the great ship drifted amid a brown scum and debris of all kinds. Authenticity is linked to this account because it references anciently well documented flood details, but does not cite any known text showing this is an original composition. The 7 days of the flooding and the cause of the deluge being an object in the sky are common denominators in many of the most ancient flood traditions. They're both mentioned here. Interestingly, in the book of Genesis, we don't have a single mention of anything in the sky that caused the great flood. Now, in the Book of Gleanings, after many days, the great ship came to rest upon Cardu in the mountains of Ashtar, against Nisham in the land of God. This is Mount Ararat in Turkey. The reference to the land of God is going to be Turkey, and for many, many reasons. I've discussed all that in prior presentations, showing you the links between Ionia, the seven cities that Paul listed that were the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And you already know about Derinkuyu and the 58, 59 underground cities of Turkey. You already know about Catalhuyuk and the other 50-something Huyuk sites, and how Göbekli Tepe was pre-flood. It wasn't Ice Age. It wasn't near as old as these people are saying. How the Tepe and the Huyuk sites all go in tandem with the pre-flood goddess and bull worship. Now we get to the third book in the Kolbrin Bible. We get to the Book of Scrolls. In the Book of Scrolls, we read, "We had been told the ways of men from olden times, but we heeded not the warning. Now the truth is scattered in the four quarters of the earth. These writings have been rewritten with diligent care, and they have been transcribed exactly as they are, and no thought or belief of mine has gone into them. May those to whom they come as a heritage be no less circumspect in dealing with them." The Book of the Sons of Fire. They came from the temple of that lake dedicated to the bright-bearded one who once saved earth from destruction through fiery hail by making a third round. This is an obscure statement that mentions a savior. A bearded person implying the saved or smooth skin with no facial hair, and this is a very common denominator in ancient tradition. The Sumerians were smooth of skin and described the Anuna as gods and bearded, just as they did the ancient Chinese with their dragon kings. Remember, the Sumerians called themselves the black-headed people. And on Sumerian art, they are beardless. These seem to be reflected in the Aymara, the South American, Incan, Olmec, Mayan, Toltec, Aztec veneration of the bearded civilization bringer in their earliest stories. We're talking about Viracocha, Votan, Boquica, Quetzalcoatl. These are all bearded stranger stories. These are all gods of ancient America who brought civilization to the ancestors. Reference to the temple of the lake and the bright bearded one sounds like the legends of Votan and Viracocha at Lake Titicaca, high in the ruins of the Andes at Tiahuanaco, where stands the Gate of the Sun. The Book of Manuscripts. Wait a minute. Text called scroll. Oh, text. It's supposed to be text. The Book of Manuscripts text called Scroll of Emad begins with the writings from olden days that tell of strange things and of great happenings in the times of our fathers who lived in the beginning. All men can know of such times as declared in the Book of Ages, but the gods had their birth in events and things which were in the beginning time. Chapter 3 is of the destroyer. This is the same Book of Manuscripts men forgot the days of the wait a minute. This is the same Book of Manuscripts when men forgot the days of the destroyer. I was supposed to say when. Only the wise know where it went and that it will return at its appointed hour. Talking about the destroyer. What the narrator is saying here is that what he is citing is the ancient Book of Manuscripts that the forefathers also had as a warning of the coming of the destroyer. So the narrator is basically saying, I'm just relating to you what we already had written down. So a knowledge of Phoenix visitations was actually once taught, according to this text. It had been accurately predicted on several occasions, as shown in the Archaix research. The Book of Manuscripts reads that it raged across the heavens in the days of wrath, and this is its likeness. It was as a billowing cloud of smoke and wrapped in a ruddy glow, not distinguishable in joint or limb. Its mouth was an abyss from which came flames smoking hot cinders. When ages pass, certain laws operate upon the stars and the heavens. Their ways change, and there is movement and restlessness. They are no longer constant, and a great light appears readily in the skies. Phoenix appears initially as a strange red star. When blood drops upon the earth, the destroyer will appear, and mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes. So the destroyer brings volcanic activity. Trees will be destroyed and all living things engulfed. Waters will be swallowed up by the land and the sea will boil. There is again red rains or blood rains, which is a hallmark of the Phoenix phenomenon. Nibiru or Nemesis X appearances have never yielded a similar description. We don't have red rains and red blood on the Nemesis X dates. The heavens will burn brightly and redly. There will be a copper hue over the face of the land, followed by a day of darkness. A new moon will appear and break up and fall. Moonfall. What? The people will scatter in madness. They will hear the trumpet and battle cry of the destroyer and will seek refuge within dens in the earth, and terror will eat away at their hearts. This is exactly what the book of Revelation chapter 6 verse 4 and 5 says when the sixth seal is broken and the moon turns red as blood and the sun turns black as sackcloth and the stars of heaven fall like untimely figs shaken by a mighty wind, and the kings and the rulers of the earth go into hide in the dens and the caves and the mountains, and they go to hide from the face of the one that appears in the sky. This is in the book of Revelation. It's exactly what we see here. Their courage will flow from them like water from a broken pitcher. They will be eaten up in the flames of wrath and consumed by the breath of the destroyer. Here is a very interesting prophecy text. The only prophecy that I found in all the Kolbrin Bible, and it's a prophecy that's very relative to the Phoenix research. So let's see what it has to say. In the Book of Manuscripts, we read, "Thus it was in the days of heavenly wrath, which hath gone, and thus it will be in the days of doom when it comes again. The times of its coming and going are known unto the wise." Yeah, Archaix veterans, you guys are in that class. The times of its coming and going are known unto the wise. At this point, we have overkilled. We've there's no way to say this without sounding absolutely boastful. But there is no overturning the Phoenix chronology at this point. Too many thousands of data points have created a perfect data set. There's just no, the prodigious amount of years of doctoral research that would have to go in, a whole committee would have to just be engaged in a smear campaign. It would cost a fortune, and yet we have it all, and that's just to attack it, not to undermine it. I'm just saying that the Phoenix chronology is absolute. It's not just in my videos, but it's also in my published books. Hundreds of charts. You guys have seen it all. It's in my Chronicon. There's no hiding it now. I've got drives with the whole chronology spread to thousands of locations all over the world now. There's just no hiding it anymore. It's not going to happen. We got 15 more years to the return of the Phoenix. The times of its coming and going are known unto the wise. There are the signs of times we shall perceive. Okay, there are the signs of times we shall perceive the destroyer's return. 110 generations shall pass in the west, and nations will rise and fall. Men will fly in the air as birds and swim in the seas as fishes. Men will talk peace with one another, but hypocrisy and deceit shall have their day. Women will be as men, and men will be as women. Passion will be a plaything of man. Men shall be divided by their races, and the children will be born as strangers among them. Brothers shall strive with brother, and husband against wife. Fathers will no longer instruct their sons, and the sons will be wayward. Women will become the common property of man and will no longer be held in high regard and respect. Book of the Manuscript reads that in those days, men will have the great book before them. Talking about the Kolbrin Bible. The Kolbrin Bible is predicting that in the future, in the last days, right before the coming of the return of the doom shape, men, the wise, will have the Kolbrin Bible. Wisdom will be revealed. The few will be gathered for a stand. It is the hour of trial. The dauntless ones will survive. The stout-hearted will not go down in destruction. Evidently, there will be people who are awakened in the last days who will survive the Phoenix return with little loss. I've been telling you guys that for a long time. I know I still got the majority of the people that listen to me. You still haven't processed what I've been telling you over and over and over. Phoenix is a frequency hunter. It's like a hunter killer weapon in the sky, but it's like it doesn't see people. It sees vibration. And this is why the elite put out the news field. This is why the elite they broadcast everything they're doing, because they want you to vibrate at a negative frequency. They want you to fear. They want you to absorb all the news reels. This is what they want. This is why they get you to take the jab. And then 3 years later, they gaslight you and say, we didn't make you take it, even though they threatened taking everything you had if you didn't. You understand? It's an FU, but it's intentional. It's to get you pissed off. It's to get you mad, because Phoenix hunts frequency, and those who are vibrating on the frequency of fear are automatically targeted. So I've been telling you this for years. I have never deviated from that. Phoenix attaches, the Phoenix destruction attaches to frequency. I tell you guys all the time, we are living in two different worlds at the same time. We are living in the highly individualized, as we are living as a highly individualized soul within your own arithmetic, within your own world. But you're also simultaneously living in the world of the collective, which is the simulacrum. And if you're vibrating on the frequencies that the majorum of those souls in the simulacrum are suffering, then you will suffer whatever consequences that they suffer. But if you're not, if you've insulated your own informed field because you understand that all power and protection comes from within and there's nothing without that can do anything for you, man, I don't even think Phoenix can see you. You're non-existent. Remember, we're not dealing with intruder planets and worlds and none of that shit that we're told in the uniformitarian model. We are dealing with high sophistication. We are dealing with something, a spiritual technology that is so advanced that we can barely even penetrate, barely even approach a peripheral of understanding of what we're dealing with at all. Yeah, this is a technologically advanced experience. And the avatar, it's this bridge. Central nervous system is this bridge between the psyche and the simulation. Once you understand it's all simulated, man, there's nothing that can hurt you. The text continues, O mortal men who wait without understanding, where will you hide yourselves in the dread days of doom, when the heavens shall be torn apart and the skies rent in twain, in the days when children will turn gray-headed? This is the thing which will be seen. This is the terror your eyes will behold. This is the form of destruction that will rush upon you. There will be a great body of fire with glowing head, with many mouths and eyes ever changing. Terrible teeth will be seen in a formless mouth, and a fearful dark belly will grow readily from fires inside. Even the most stout-hearted man will tremble, and his bowels will be loosened, for this is not a thing understandable to men. What's being described is the destroyer, and we know from other ancient records, Phoenix was the destroyer. That should have been in blue. Correct this real quick. It returns in May in just 15 more years. Continuing in the Book of Manuscripts, the doom shape called the destroyer in Egypt was seen in all lands thereabouts. In color, it was bright and fiery, in appearance and changing and unstable. It twisted about itself like a coil, like water bubbling into a pool from an underground water supply, and all men agree it was the most fearsome sight. It was not a great comet or a loosened star, being more like a fiery body of flame. Its movements on high were slow. Below it swirled in all the manner of smoke, and it remained close to the sun, whose face it hid. Remember, Phoenix routinely hides the sun. There was a bloody redness about it which changed as it passed along its course. It caused death and destruction in its rising and setting. It swept the earth with a gray cinder rain and caused many plagues, hunger, and other evils. It bit the skin of men and beasts until they became mottled with sores. The earth was troubled and shook. The hills and mountains moved and rocked. The dark smoke filled heavens, bowed over earth, and a great howl came to the ears of living men, borne to them upon the wings of the wind. It was the cry of the dark Lord, the master of dread. Thick clouds of fiery smoke passed before him, and there was an awful hail of hot stones and coals of fire. The doom shape thundered sharply in the heavens and shot out bright lightnings. The channels of water were turned back unto themselves. When the land tilted and great trees were tossed about and snapped like twigs, then a voice like 10,000 trumpets was heard over the wilderness. And before its burning breath, the flames parted, and the whole of the land was moved. Mountains melted, the sky itself roared like 10,000 lions in agony, and bright arrows of blood sped back and forth across its face. Earth swelled up like bread upon the earth. Now, the introduction of the term doom shape pretty much lends another layer of credibility to the antiquity of this narrative. Phoenix has been called Fenris, Fenrir, the destroyer, the destroying angel, the angel of death, the Fink, Typhon, the dragon, and so many other such epithets. In the Book of Manuscripts, this is what we have when it appeared in days long gone by the olden times. It is thus described in the old records, few of which remain. It is said that when it appears in the heavens above the earth, splits open from the heat like a nut roasted before the fire. Then flames shoot up through the surface and leap about like fiery fiends. The moisture inside the land is all dried up, and the pastures and cultivated places are consumed in flames, and trees become white ash. The doom shape is like a circling ball of flame which scatters small fiery offspring in its train. It covers about a fifth part of the entire sky and sends writhing snake-like fingers down to earth. Before it, the sky appears frightened and it breaks up and scatters away. Midday is no brighter than night. Remember, Phoenix's chief attribute is darkening the sun. It spawns a host of terrible things. These are things said of the destroyer in the old records. Read them with solemn heart, knowing that the doom shape has its appointed time and will return. It would be foolish to let them go unheeded now. Men say such things are not destined for our days, but they are wrong. The Book of Manuscripts on the Dark Days. So, this has all been very enlightening. But now we enter the very last part, and it's a message that is so important. I have done 2 previous videos in the last month, both focused on Exodus. Now, we do the Kolbrin Bible. The focus on Exodus from the construct is very interesting because it involves the Phoenix again, the Phoenix phenomenon. The story of the Exodus in the Bible is of a people who left Egypt during a cataclysm. But what's very interesting is that the cataclysm affected the Egyptians. It didn't affect the slaves. Process that as I read the Kolbrin Bible's version of the Exodus account, which is it's pretty different than the Jewish version, which appeared in the Book of Exodus. All right. Now we see Phoenix visits Egypt. This is the Exodus cataclysm in the Book of Manuscripts. The dark days begin with the last visitation of the destroyer, and they were foretold by strange omens in the skies. So, before we go on, the Kolbrin Bible has covered the Adam and Eve reset pole shift destruction, which was a flooding. It covered the 3439 BC appearance of Enoch, and 1/3 of the human race being destroyed as described in the Book of Jasher, which is 1,200 years before the flood of Noah. It covered the flood of Noah as well, the Typhon flood. So those 3 destructions were covered, and now it's covering the great destruction of the Exodus event after that. Here it is. The dark days begin with the last visitation of the destroyer, and they were foretold by strange omens in the skies. All men were silent and went about with pale faces. This is when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. That's the narrative here. The leaders of the slaves, which had built the city to the glory of Thutmose, stirred up unrest, and no man raised his arm against him. Thutmose was the Pharaoh at that time. Thutmose the fourth, I believe, or the third. I think it was the third. They foretold great events of which the people were ignorant and of which temple seers were not informed. These were days of ominous calm when the people waited, for they knew not the presence of the unseen doom that was felt. The hearts of men were stricken, laughter was heard no more, and grief and wailing sounded throughout the land. Even the voices of children were still, and they did not play together, but stood silent. The slaves became bold and insolent, and women were the possession of any man. Fear walked the land, and women became barren with terror, for they could not conceive, and those with child aborted. All men closed up within themselves. The days of stillness were followed by a time when the noise of trumpeting and shrilling was heard in the heavens, and the people became like frightened beasts without a herdsman. The public records were cast forth and destroyed, and no man knew who were slaves and who were masters. What we have being described here is civil unrest right before a terrible cataclysm. It's like people knew something bad was going to happen, and now there's a slave revolt, and the infrastructure of Egypt is suffering because nothing's working right now. The people cried out to Pharaoh in their distress, but he stopped his ears and acted like a deaf man. There were those who spoke falsely before Pharaoh in those times of gods hostile towards the land. Therefore, the people cried out for their blood to appease it, but it was not these strange priests who put strife in the land instead of peace. For one was even of the household of Pharaoh and walked among the people unhampered. So one of the causes for the civil unrest is a revolutionary who happens to be of the house of Pharaoh. This is very similar to the story of Moses. Dust and smoke clouds darkened the day and colored the waters upon which they fell with a bloody hue. Plague was throughout the land. The river was bloody and blood was everywhere, starting to sound like Exodus. The water was vile, and men's stomachs shrank from drinking. Those who did drink from the river vomited it up, for it was polluted. The dust tore wounds in the skin of man and beast. In the glow of the destroyer, the earth was filled with redness. Vermin bred and filled the air, and the face of the earth with loathsomeness. Wild beasts afflicted with torments. Under the lashing sand and ashes, they came out of their lairs in the wastelands and caves and stalked the abodes of men. All the tame beasts whimpered, and the land was filled with the cries of sheep and moans of cattle. Trees throughout the land were destroyed, and no herb or fruit was to be found. The face of the land was battered and devastated by a hail of stones, which smashed down all that stood. In the path of the torrent they swept down in hot showers, and strange flowing fire ran along the ground. In their wake the fish of the river died in the polluted waters. Worms, insects, and reptiles sprang up from the earth in huge numbers. Great gusts of wind brought swarms of locusts which covered the sky. As the destroyer flung itself through the heavens, it grew great gusts of cinders across the land. The gloom of the long night spread a dark mantle of blackness which extinguished every ray of light. None knew when it was day or when it was night. Book of Manuscripts reads that the darkness was not like the clean blackness of night, but a thick darkness in which the breath of men was stopped in their throats. Men gasped in a hot cloud of vapor on the night of the destroyer's wrath. When its terror was at its height, there was a hail of rocks, and the earth heaved as pain rent her bowels. Gates, columns, and walls were consumed by fire, and the statues of gods were overthrown and broken throughout Egypt. People fled outside their dwellings and in fear and were slain by the hail. Those who took shelter from the hail were swallowed when the earth split open. The habitations of men collapsed upon those inside, and there was panic on every hand. But the slaves who lived in huts in the reed lands at the palace of the pits were spared, the land under the wrath of the destroyer. How interesting that the Israelites are not affected by the cataclysm. It shook itself, and the temples and palaces were destroyed. Even the great one, the firstborn of Pharaoh, died with the highborn in the midst of the terror and falling stones. Children of princes were cast out into the streets, and those who were not cast out died within their abodes. There were 9 days of darkness and upheaval while a tempest raged, such as never had been known before. When it passed away, brother buried brother. Throughout the land, men rose up against those in authority and fled from the cities to dwell in the tents in the outlands. Egypt lacked great men to deal with the times. The people were weak from fear and bestowed gold, silver, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and copper upon the slaves. To their priests gave them chalices, urns, and ornaments. The people of Egypt are literally giving all their wealth to the slaves. It's an act of penance. They feel that the gods of the slaves are the ones destroying Egypt. Pharaoh alone remained calm and strong. In the midst of the confusion, the slaves spared by the destroyer left the accursed land forthwith. Their multitude moved in the gloom of the half-dawn under a mantle of fine swirling gray ash, leaving the burning fields and shattered cities behind them. Many Egyptians attached to this host, for one who was great led them forth. Remember, it's a person of the house of Pharaoh is the one that led the revolt, slave revolt. In the Bible, he's Moses. That's the Jewish version, though. For all we know, the entire Old Testament was written off of the Kolbrin Bible. It might be a reason why academia, which is basically Jewish controlled, is suppressing the book. A priest and prince of the inner courtyard. That's the Moses figure here. So these details, they're phenomenal. Let's entertain this tangent. An incredibly authentic reference to Moses type figure is here without even mentioning his name, who is in the rabbinical writings and in the Book of Jasher was an Egyptian prince and ruler and a former military commander. He was raised in the house of Pharaoh. None of the Jewish dressings are here as they are in the biblical Exodus text. We have here a description of a thriving multicultural civilization which was a metropolis that totally falls apart, not in 10 mythical plagues like a Jewish drama, but as a prolonged cataclysm that totally ended civilization in Egypt. Remember, I didn't even put this in here, but remember in prior presentations, I show you that Cecrops, Danoi, there's so many other ones. They all left Egypt at the exact same time, and they founded Ionia, and they founded Greece, and they founded Phoenicia. Yeah, I'm not naming one of them. There's one of them. It's Cecrops, Danoi, who led the Danaan, and there's a third one. I just can't remember his name right now, but I just mentioned him in a prior video a week ago. But there was 3 massive groups that left Egypt, and not one of them is mentioned as Jewish. Not one of them is mentioned as the one in the Old Testament. This is in the historical and traditional record for other Mediterranean peoples. They all left Exodus at the exact same time. Here's another reference here. Here's another reference to a people leaving Egypt. They're leaving overland. The other guy I'm forgetting to mention was Phoenician. It was Cecrops, Danoi, and there's a Phoenician, and I can't remember his name. A Phoenician who led his people out of Egypt. I can't remember. Just mentioned him, and that's ticking me off. I just mentioned him last week in my Exodus video. All right. So, the textual evidence in the Kolbrin manuscripts is of historical records composed independent of or before the Old Testament, for which we have evidence was compiled only in the 3rd century BC at its very earliest. What we're seeing here is a cleaner version of the Exodus, which doesn't have any racial or cultural attachments. Because the book of Exodus is a racial version of the story. Anyway, this is amazing to me. Now, concerning the escaped slaves in the Book of Manuscripts, they turned before Nashari and stopped at Shoko, which was the place of quarries. They passed the waters of Mahand and came to the valley of Pikarov toward the Mora. They came up against the waters which blocked their way, and their hearts were in despair. I don't know where any of these places are. I don't know. But they came across a body of water that they couldn't pass over. The night was a night of fear and dread, for there was high moaning above the black winds. From the underworld were loosed fire that sprang from the ground. The hearts of the slaves shrank within them, for they knew the wrath of Pharaoh followed them, and that there was no way of escape. They hurled abuse upon those who led them, and strange rites were performed along the shore. The slaves disputed among themselves, and there was violence. Pharaoh had gathered his army and followed the slaves. After he departed, there were riots and disorder behind him, for the cities were plundered. The laws were the laws were cast out of the judgment halls and trampled underfoot, and the streets and the storehouses and granaries were burst open and robbed. Roads were flooded, and none could pass along them. People lay dead on every side. The palace was split, and the princes and officials had fled, so that none was left with authority to command. The lists of numbers were destroyed. Isn't this interesting? I didn't even make this connection before, but if it's true that rabbinical scribes wrote the book of Exodus based off the Kolbrin Bible, and this is why the Kolbrin Bible is suppressed, because it's the original, it would also make sense of where they got the next book, because the next book after the book of Exodus is called the Book of Numbers. And here we have right here in the Kolbrin Bible, the lists of numbers were destroyed. I wonder if there is a correlate here. Public places were overthrown and households became confused. An unknown Pharaoh pressed on in sorrow, for behind him all was desolation and death. So I find it interesting that we have the perspective of Pharaoh here. We don't have that in Exodus. We don't have that in the book of Exodus. Pharaoh's the bad guy. He's the enemy. Good. We're glad he dies. But here we have some humanity bestowed upon Pharaoh. Pharaoh's trying to go get the slaves back only to preserve the integrity of his culture. He knows he can't return without them, because he needs somebody to rebuild. But Pharaoh knows he's in front of him, he's got to get the slaves. Behind him, his civilization is falling apart. There goes my dog. Before him were things he could not understand, and he was afraid, but he carried on himself well and stood before his host with courage. He sought to bring back the slaves, for the people said their magic was greater than the magic of Egypt. I gotta stop this dog, guys. I can't do it. Go to the house. Go get the barn. Sit down. It's not like you ain't had enough treats and bones today. All right. This is my rebellious dog, Bella. The host of Pharaoh came upon the slaves by the saltwater shores, but was held back from them by a breath of fire. A great a great cloud was spread over the hosts and darkened the sky. None could see except for the fiery glow and the unceasing lightnings which rent the covering cloud overhead. A whirlwind arose in the east and swept over the encamped hosts. A gale raged all night, and in the red twilight dawn there was a movement of the earth. The waters receded from the seashore and were rolled back on themselves. There was a strange silence, and then in the gloom it was seen that the waters had parted, leaving a passage between. The land had risen, but it was disturbed and trembled. The way was not straight nor clear. The waters about were as if spun within a bowl, and swampland alone remained undisturbed. From the horn of the destroyer came a high, shrilling noise which stopped the ears of men. This is amazing because what is being described, how the Israelites got over the Reed Sea. In the Exodus account, Moses raises his staff, God responds, and the waters part and form two walls, and the people walk across, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yes, we love to believe in miracles. I mean, we like to believe a man walked on water, but that was a literary document. It wasn't literal. And nor did Moses raise his staff and then the ocean separate into two walls. It is not what happened. The Kolbrin Bible explains it was an upheaval, and that makes absolute sense. But even the upheaval, the land was broken. The way wasn't straight. The land just jutted up and separated the waters and gave them a land bridge to walk over. It's an earthquake. And for those of you who don't know, for those of you who haven't read my Chronicon, you'll find out there are two times in the historical record that the Jordan River flowed backwards because of upheaval, because of an earthquake shoved parts of the land up, and the river was forced to go backwards for a while. And then whatever happened, man, it came back down. So now the horn of Phoenix continuing to blast from the sky reveals that the parting of the Reed Sea, also called the Red Sea in the Exodus account, but the parting of the Reed Sea was due to upheaval and the catastrophe, not a legendary Jewish Moses raising his staff to split the waters. Again, the Kolbrin text is more realistic. It's an earthquake. In the Book of Manuscripts, we read, the slaves had been making sacrifices in despair. Their lamentations were loud now. Before the strange sight, there was hesitation and doubt. For the space of a breath, they stood still and silent, then all confusion and shouting, some pressing forward into the waters. In this way, with the doom shape in the sky blasting a horn-like noise, the slaves of Egypt made their way over a natural land bridge of dry ground, created by an upheaval, a buckling of the region that temporarily lasted before collapsing back and allowing the sea to fill it back in. This concludes our review of the Kolbrin Bible. It is evident the source materials derived from texts that no longer exist, but the narratives of its composition are unique, with no borrowing from Old Testament sources. It seems to be just the opposite. In fact, nowhere in the Kolbrin Bible's almost 700 pages is there a hint of a knowledge of the Old Testament. Not one book is mentioned. It seems to be dictated from perspectives unlike those of other ancient testimonies that relate to the same events. This is a valuable addition to the Archaix data on the Phoenix phenomenon and a better record for the Exodus event than the Book of Exodus itself. Man, let me look at the time, stop sharing my screen. That is my presentation, guys, on the Kolbrin Bible's Lost Secrets of Phoenix. Right there. Thank you, guys. Hit that like button if you appreciate the presentation. It only took me a few hours to put it together. Took days and days and days to read the Kolbrin Bible, but the actual presentation didn't take that long to put together. Grendel Dark, how you doing, bud? Just seen you in the chat. Yeah, man, but this is I'm still sticking to my guns, guys. I don't see in all the research that I've done, I still don't see a reason to fear the Phoenix. I don't. Everything described in this text is harrowing. Everything described in this text is real. It goes with the historical record. Every other Phoenix visitation that's happened, but I'm telling you, there must have been a lot of survivors. Or how did all these traditions get passed down to us? How did all this amazing data on the Phoenix that has been suppressed by academia, suppressed by the establishment, but put together for you in over 1,000 data points in the Archaix research? How is it possible if there weren't a lot of people, not only who survived to record these things, but the very fact that all this data comes from a wide diversity of sources means that the establishment for a very long period of time have been actively suppressing all of this. Imagine all the testimonies. Imagine all the archaeological artifacts. Imagine all the records, all the books that no longer exist because they've been filtered out by the people who stole history and rewrote it and injected themselves into positions in the historical record for which they did not participate. Kolbrin Bible doesn't mention any ethnicities other than the Egyptians. None. You're really going to agitate the shit out of me today, aren't you? Oh my God, I'm going to let this dog out now. Love you guys. More awesome presentations on the way. And my dog is about, oh my God, I'm the one who gave her the bone. Anyway, love you guys. Go and find my video before this dog drives me nuts. Find me a good little outro here.